Well, welcome everybody to our 9th Try This session for Aotearoa. And I'm going to open the space with a short karakia. E te whānau hui, whaia te mātaranga kia marama, kia whai take ngā mahi katoa, tū maia, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. And that's just saying, for this gathering, we seek knowledge for understanding, and we have purpose in what we're doing, and we're standing tall and being strong and showing respect for each other. So greetings, it's great to see so many new faces. Thanks for joining us. We hope that you'll find this really useful. And Tim is definitely around. He's just making sure that people, oh, here he is. I'll let him in right now. Here we go. And while I'm doing that, I'll also share my slides. So just give me a moment. Can you see? Here we go. Tell me when you can see it. All good? Great. So I'll make a start, but can you see the slide, or can you see like the whole slideshow thing? I need to start the slideshow, don't I? There we go. Ah, that's better. Right. So here's our overview of what we're going to do this evening. We are, first of all, when we do these sessions, if this is your first time, what we usually do is we talk about the key that we introduced in the last session and reflect and see if anybody's used it and if they've got any stories to tell from the front line. And then we're going to go on to look at key number 9, which is our focus for this evening. And I'm going to take us through the New Zealand example from the book. So let's see how we go. Did anybody have a go at create a drawing, either since last week or at some time? Anybody got a story to tell? You might need to just shout, because I can't actually see all of you while I'm sharing my speak screen. Anyone? Going. No. Hello, Tim. Here's Tim, everyone. Tim, this is everyone. Everyone, this is Tim. So
hello.
Create a drawing is it's a great one. The one we were talking about last time. I took a couple of screenshots from the online teacher planning that you can find on the Try This website. So let's have a quick look at this example. This is from Whittington School in the UK, actually, and I was there watching this one be taught in, what was it, Tim, back February of this year?
February time, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. So in this example, I've taken slight liberties by posting this because we didn't exactly start with a picture. We started with string, but we laid some string on the floor to represent the Amazon River. These students were studying the Amazon River, but then it moved on to the drawing, and the students were using drawings to, as you can see in this picture, to signify different features along the river. And I can tell you, and then some more things beside, and I can tell you that time to draw their own individual drawing and then to bring it into the whole, I could really see the magic of this key in that creation. Do you remember how long they took over those drawings, Tim? And how obsessed they were with finding the exact creature they wanted to put on the riverbank and everything else. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that one, because you were the teacher?
Yeah, well, what we were trying to do was to generate some investment in the river, so that the students had been studying the Amazon for a while as a topic, but they hadn't really thought about it as something that they might be responsible for.
Right.
So in order to sort of get to that place, and later on in the drama, there was some confrontation with somebody who was chopping down the trees. But in order to get to that place, in order to get to the place where the children were invested in that stretch of river, they needed something to have created themselves. It wasn't enough just to say, imagine if you were standing beside the river and you were people who worked on the river. That's not enough. That will be a shallow and a superficial taking on of that responsibility. By creating that part of the river. They had themselves invested in that part of their part, if you like. And then when it was laid out together, it created this amazing kind of co-created image, which was full of things that they were enormously concerned about because they themselves had put those things into the pictures. So there were animals, there were trees, there were sacred sites. There was all kinds of other things that they themselves had created and so were themselves invested in. So it is a wonderful key in lots of ways. There's many different ways that you can use it, but one of the ways that it works so well is to bring the children into the fiction, but not in a superficial way, but in a way that they become heavily invested in.
Thanks, Tim. And I think one of the things I remember about this class in particular is, as you can see from the picture here, they're older kids. They're at the top of the primary school range, and they hadn't done dramatic inquiry at all before, had they?
No.
So this was
No.
a brand new class. And so I think working and the teacher wasn't sure how willing they were going to be. As it turned out, they were incredibly obsessed by it all. But I think starting with drawings was a really, in fact, we spend a lot of time in that lesson using drawings as a way to create the world. And I think that idea of the creator drawing key as a threshold into the imagined world it's also a good start to feel that investment, so that when they did the role taking later on, that sort of seemed like a natural thing to do because they already had created and cared about the world. Whereas if they'd gone straight into role taking, I think it would have been a big ask for that group of children. So advantages there too. Anything else to say about that one, or any questions from the floor about that one before we move on? No? Great. We did a bit of creating drawings, didn't we, the other day in our winter school? I was just thinking we were what were we doing? We were trying to invest in the world of the responsible team we were going to be. This was in Mantle of the Expert as well, and we were going to be like mediators, conciliators, and we used drawings to create the website, didn't we? Yeah, that was really successful. So you can do lots of things with these drawings. I think it's a key you'll come back to time and time again. And in fact, when we're teaching drama, we often think that we have to be teaching, we're not doing drama unless we've got people in role, but actually often more and more, and especially, watching Tim, as I have been doing recently, there's a lot of scope for bringing in the iconic, the imagery. So use and enjoy. All righty. So there are some teacher examples, and we do encourage you, as always, to send your examples in to us because it's great to see examples shared on that website. Okay, so let's move on to key number 9 then, which is our focus for tonight. And I'm going to, as always, I'm literally going to teach it from the book. So excuse me if I'm a little pedestrian, but I quite like demonstrating how hopefully the book becomes a pick up and use. The key that this key number 9 is using an image, but it's an existing image, often a photograph or a painting or an engraving, some form of graphic representation. I think this is a key for using with an image that contains people. We've said that in the book, and I think given what we're going to do with it, imagine ourselves within it, that's an important parameter. And one does need some information if it's historical information. You do need to have a little bit of that historical information with you. So on that note, I want to acknowledge the support that I got in generating this key. This one was one where our cultural mentor Warren Warbrick advised and helped me. Warren is Rangatani, and he helped me source a photograph and some information that would make this piece of my local history come to life. So I just want to acknowledge that as we start here. So images really speak for themselves. So I'm going to show you on the next slide this image, and then I'm going to go quiet and just invite you to have a look at it and see what you make of it. It's a black and white photograph. And it was taken over 140 years ago, which in New Zealand terms is a long time. It's in England, it's just the other day. In terms of certainly Pākehā New Zealand history, 140 years ago feels like a long time. Now the fronds around the edge of the image are not part of the image. They're something that was placed to edge the image. But if you look through the fronds, you'll see some buildings and some people and some rather intriguing details. So I'm going to invite you to, oh, and the title of this image is Hui ki Papaioia, which means a meeting in Papaioia, and Papaioia is the name of the center of Palmerston North, which is the town where I live. So the city where I live. So yeah, just tell me what you notice, what you can see, and let's concentrate on describing what we can see rather than guessing what might be going on here. So it's not the clearest of photos, but if you have a good look, you might be able to see some things. What do you notice?
Lots of people sitting facing forward.
Okay. Where's that, Evelyn?
Well, that's what I think they are.
Are you can you see my arrow? Are you talking about, can you see my cursor, or am I the only one who can see
No, I
it?
can't. But I'm looking from in the very centre of the photo towards the left. They look to me to be people sitting quite closely together facing towards my left of the photo.
So you can see ranks of things, and they're kind of a uniform size, and it looks like it might be people seated and facing in the same direction.
Yep.
Right. What else do you notice? What else does anybody else notice?
I noticed that people are dressed differently. Guys on the main on the left of the photo, they are like wearing some other different kind of clothing than the ones that are seated.
Okay, so you notice that there's a man standing, and he seems to be dressed. How would you describe his clothing, Ulysses?
Well, like more formal.
Okay. What's formal about it?
Like he was wearing a jacket, some sort of different hat.
And I see he's got a sort of a waistcoat or some kind of under thing as well. I think that's what I might be seeing there. And certainly to today's eyes, that looks like quite formal wear, doesn't it? What other people can we see?
Oh, sorry, you go.
Can I just ask a question, just to clear something up in my own mind? The group. So behind the man with the hat who's standing up, behind them is another further away, sort of mid-distance, is another figure standing up, sort of you know, in the shadows, as it were.
Yeah.
And then in front of that person is a line of things.
And that's what Evelyn was wondering, was a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there seems to be one or two people sitting in that bunch of things. But I'm not sure if the rest of it is people or whether...
We're wondering what that might be. If it's a rank of people, they're all sitting very close together. And you're wondering, Tim, you're wondering, in fact, whether it might be something else.
Right.
Are they watching some kind of animal, like, does it look like there's people on animals, like riding animals behind that fence, or no?
And you're wondering whether the fence is kind of fencing off an area that might have, is there a particular shape there that looks like a person that might be on an animal?
Yeah, just on the center right.
How we can't point, isn't it? Yeah. There's a shape there that sort of looks like it could. I see the one you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Robin's got a hand up.
Hi everybody. Yeah, I think there's a little girl God, it's quite hard to see though. There's a
Mhm.
road in the front, and then
Mhm.
this where that guy is with the hat and the jacket,
Mm-hmm.
and he seems to be looking at something. So I don't
Mm.
know what that is in front of him. But if you come a little bit further towards the right, there seems to be a little Maori girl there and a
Mhm.
dog,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a whole lot of a pile of looks like cloth.
Mm-hmm.
There. I wonder whether those things behind there are turkeys, but I could be wrong. And
Mhm.
then there's this big fence, and then behind paddocks. But I noticed the buildings, the colonial buildings.
Oh,
It
how would
almost
you know
looks,
they were colonial buildings?
yes, well, because of the design of them, the windows and the roof and that was there, that design in the early or
So you're
late
noticing quite
1800s.
large windows with kind of panes, and what would you call those? Like smaller panes divided and like a sash design.
Those
Then
sash
those
windows.
verandas. Yeah, is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yeah.
those verandas and the 2-story sort of things. And in the background, you've got something like a big meeting house or something, maybe. It's a
Mm.
big building, you know.
Larger
And
building.
then it looked, yeah, and then I don't know what that thing is over to the right behind where there's a little girl and there's a hat and there's a fence. There seems to be another person, but it looks almost like could be a race course or a state races or something. Not sure.
It
Thank
is.
you.
It is an intriguing image, and part of what's intriguing about it is it's not that clear, is it? Like it's quite fuzzy. Are you able to see it full screen at the moment?
Yeah, I've got full screen on. But
Yeah.
hey, my eyesight's not as good as
Oh,
everybody
no,
else.
I know.
I got good glasses though, I've cleaned them. But
Anything
I
else
just
that anything? I wonder if someone has spotted something that hasn't yet been mentioned.
Is that kind of like a mill in the middle there, or am I just dreaming? I
What
don't know.
makes you think it might be a mill?
Just with the construction on the outside there, that's I don't know, just in my head that was the first thing I thought of. So maybe I've seen something like that before. I'm not sure.
So you're seeing
it looks industrial.
You're seeing that's what I was going to say, Robin. You're seeing a building that is saying industry to you and reminding you
Yeah.
of something that maybe it's got a mill wheel or something. It's certainly not the same as that colonial looking shop front over beside it, or the big.
No.
And I noticed there's a space between those shop fronts don't go, or those buildings with the verandas. I think it is shop fronts because one of them's got writing on it. They don't join up all the way along the street, do they? There's a couple there, and then there's quite a big gap.
And it appears to be a built-up area like a town, but there's this enormous clear area that looks like people are able to come to do something.
Right. And there's something to do with the fact that they're sitting. Can you see the people seated on the right there?
Yes.
So it seems to me that there are groups of people, but they're all part of the same whole, as it were. They're not.
That's interesting.
So there's a group on the right who seem to be together. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's another smaller group a little bit further away, but this side of the fence. And then I think there are other people in amongst whatever those things are that are piled up around them in the sort of on the left-hand side. And then as well as the man with the hat and the jacket on, there's a girl sitting at his feet, and there's also a boy.
You spotted the boy. Can you see him peeping through the fronds there on the hard left of the photo? Is that the one you mean, Tim?
Yeah, and he seems to be looking at the camera.
He does.
So yeah, it's a collection, I think, of people rather than, I don't know, rather than a sort of rather than a shopping crowd or people at a race course or something like that. They seem to have a common purpose, but they're sort of in different places.
Isn't that interesting that you can read that? I mean, I did give you the title, Hui Meeting in Papaioa, but there's something about the way people are sitting that they seem to be together, but also in these small groups. And there's this interesting sense of shared purpose about it.
Yes.
And I don't think we'd have got that if we hadn't looked hard. Yeah.
No, the other thing it has is a sense of waiting. Like it feels like whatever's. It feels like I've been there. Do you know what I mean? When you've been sat and waiting for something to happen for a long time, it's got that sort of feeling of they haven't just arrived. That is the way. This isn't like 10 minutes after they got there or whatever. They've been there a long time. This feels like they're, the children are wandering around. Everybody's sort of settled down and waiting. That's how it
Something
feels to
about
me.
that.
And the
way
man
of
with the
sitting low.
hat isn't, wherever they're all looking, the man with the hat isn't looking there, which adds to that sense of something is going to happen but hasn't yet. He's watching the little child, I think, on the ground.
Mm.
Is that group on the left, that big group, are they looking in a different direction to the group on the right?
There's certainly a sense of that being separate from the group on the right, isn't it? We've got a group on the right. We've got another group sitting just inside the fence, haven't we, as a sort of a circle?
Mm.
What do we notice about what the people are wearing who are sitting in those groups?
Yeah, well, it's the hat, the formal
It's
hats.
hats. Yeah.
And it's cold.
Why
It's
do you
not
say
hot,
that?
because they've all got jackets on.
Right, there's some jackets. I'm noticing
Jersey.
these sort of shawls or wraps around people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a horse, isn't there? There's a horse in front of those people on the right, or an
We
animal
wondered
or
if
something.
it might be. Yeah.
And it looks like that whole area is divided up into fences. So they've got fences going along. So they're
Yeah,
only looking at that.
white fences going all the way around, all the way around the outside of this big, expansive area. So I wonder if the fence is to keep things out, keep things in, or demarcate something. Somebody wondered if it might be a race course on the other side.
With something like our Kiwi agricultural show things, or like schools used to have with animal pet day type things.
Some kind of, event or something. Well,
and it feels like it should be animals because it's fences.
Animals, because fences say animals. They say keeping them in, keeping them out. Yeah. Any other comments or wonderings or observations before I fill you in with a little bit more information?
On the right-hand side where the person's sitting down, is that a big sack full of something there?
On the right. Right.
And where are they horses there? And that where you said about someone mentioned about the industrial building, I wondered if that was a water tower there. I don't know.
Because it's high, isn't it, Di? It's high up above the building. So whatever it is that's on the top of that, it needs to be high.
Yeah.
And water is held up high so that it has that gravity to it when it's coming down. Yeah. And can you see the environment beyond? Can anybody see in detail what's beyond those buildings?
The hills, the Tararuas.
So there are hills, yeah, just very faintly there, aren't there?
I thought that it was that the light foreground was the racecourse track. But I think that there wouldn't be buildings that look like shops so close to a racecourse. I don't think it's a racecourse.
Right.
More like a public domain, maybe, and
that's actually their road surface.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're watching something being paraded.
They're watching something. They're waiting for something. They've come together for a purpose.
I think
those are it's to do with animals.
Yeah, well, I think that those are stacks of something they've culled. I think those are dead things along the fence line.
Who's saying that?
Gillian. Sorry, I've been washing.
Right.
I didn't think anyone wanted to see that.
Yeah, it turns out Gillian's right. That stack of things that we wondered if it was people seating together. Yeah, it's a long pile of carcasses of pigs and sacks of kai, of food. Does that change what you think might be going on?
Sorry, Viv, are you saying that long line beside the man with the hat on, that's piles of pigs, like the bodies of pigs.
That is what I'm saying.
Is that what that is?
That's what I'm saying, Tim.
Oh, okay. Oh, that
And then
changes, that changes things for me quite a lot.
Me
and
too.
then and
And
I
someone
think
said
they're
it might be
watching
turkeys. Yeah, I'm not sure. The information I was given was pigs, but I'm pretty sure there'll be a mixture of kai there. There'll be meat. There'll be sacks of potatoes and kumara, and these logs over here are going to be used along with it.
Is it going to be a hangi or a
You've
hakiri?
got it. You've got it. A hangi, Tim, is where a big pit is dug, and Ulysses, this will be new for you too. A big pit is dug in the ground, and an earth oven is created, and hot stones are put in, and then the food is put in there, and it steams and cooks in the earth for a good long time, and then it's dug up for a feast.
And it's delicious.
We have that in Mexico.
Do you, mate? Do
We
you,
have that
Ulysses?
kind of
What's it called in
cooking, yeah.
Mexico?
Barbacoa.
Barbacoa. Right. In Aotearoa, we call this hangi. So,
sorry, can I ask a naive question? It looks like an awful lot of meat.
Doesn't it?
How big is this going to be? It's going to be enormous.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's going to be a town hakari feast.
A feast. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And are they watching, Viv, do you think? They're watching it being laid?
They're
Now
watching
I
and
see that.
waiting. And it isn't part of the book. It isn't written in the book, this, but I remember when I looked at the newspaper accounts of the hangi, the shop owners were really worried because the smoke and the flames were going so high from this massive that there was some concern about the wooden building. So yeah, this was a big one. This was a big one. So
Were there a special reason?
yeah, there must have been, eh? You don't get together and make a big feast like that, especially 100 years ago, especially in a country where every bit of food has to be hard won and reared and taken from place to place. It's an important occasion, right?
Would it be a singular hangi, as in one hole in the ground, or might there be more than one?
There may well be. I don't have that information, Evelyn.
I'm just looking at the amount of meat.
And
Like,
it may
that's
not have
a
been
lot
one
of blood.
day either. It could have been a succession of days. But I do know
Oh, yeah,
that I do remember that newspaper report about the inferno. So
Yeah.
certainly one day that the hangi was laid, it made a big fire.
Yeah.
But
So-
when they lay a hangi, when they lay a hangi, they don't lay just one pit. They do one for there, one for there, one for there, possibly. And then sometimes they do layer different things. I've seen them. Just saying.
Familiar. Right. Well, before I go on to tell you,
Can I just ask a couple of other questions?
Yeah,
Just,
yeah, go on.
Okay, naive ones. Firstly, this isn't not ordinary, is it? I mean, for this amount of something this big, this isn't like a regular event. This must be something special. Is that right? Or something almost unique?
My impression, and there will be people on this call who know more about these things than me, so please correct me, but my impression is that hangi is a familiar way of cooking, but the size of this would be unusual enough to take a photo of it.
It almost feels celebratory.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever the celebration, I wouldn't know, but it feels celebratory.
You would get large hangi being done for like tangi funerals, things like that, but not to this. I don't know as well, but I have a little bit of knowledge, and I wouldn't imagine it would be to this degree. This is obviously like a big town event.
Really big.
Huge.
But
So the second,
a hangi or a tangi or a funeral would feed could feed a lot of people, you know, like when the Māori Queen died, it was something like 2,000 people they fed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the second question, again, a naive one, is this is Palmerston, you said. This is where this photograph was, Palmerston North, right? So is this a sort of the normal place to have something like that happening? Or is that again, is that an unusual thing to have it in the town?
Well, let me give you a little bit more context.
Okay.
So this photo, it just occurred to me as we were talking that it was unusual enough for the photographer George Shaler to take a photo of it, and not just a photo of it, but a photo of the stacks of food. So that's interesting, isn't it? At a time when, you know, photos were not taken quickly on phones, it was worth a photo. So the photograph shows Te Marae o Hine, which is the square in Palmerston North. If you know Palmerston North, the square is there to this day. It doesn't have the posts around it anymore. It may still have some of those trees as now giant trees. And the square is a really extensive piece of land to this day. It's quite a sizable central domain. And it's 1881, and the people have come together for a big hui, a big meeting of something called the Native Land Court. That was what it was called at the time. And this court was brought together for the purpose of deciding ownership of land. And that's a very short way of saying something very complicated and painful. The long pile running parallel with the fence is a collection of sacks of food and pigs and carcasses, and that's to be placed in the hangi to be cooked to share a feast at the end of the day. So the example in the book doesn't go into a lot of detail about the Native Land Court at this point, because I think the idea is that you engross the students, the children, in this image first and imagine what it might be like later. And then you would, first, and then you would layer in some of the information about the Native Land Court later. But I think as adults, you might be hungry to kind of know some stuff or share some stuff that you know about the Native Land Court. But are there people here present who have knowledge about that and that time, that they're going, oh yes, I know a bit about the Native Land Court, and they might like to share that?
There were laws made at the time by Pākehā settlers who had obtained land. So it had come, what year was it?
This is 1881.
Yeah, so after the New Zealand Wars, where a whole lot of land had been confiscated, and there were laws made by the Pākehā government at the time about how that land could be sold and who could buy it. And there was a whole lot of, because a lot of the land had been obtained illegally, although legally according to the Pākehā law, there was a lot of angst about the whole thing. One thing that food in Māori culture is like I'm in awe of that, because food in Māori culture is a sign of noa, which is you know, you can have a robust discussion and disagreement, but then you come together to eat and it's like lifting the angst. So the thought that there was this discussion happening about land that potentially was stolen from Māori at the time and around the laws of the Native Act, and then there was food prepared in a traditional Māori way, is just, I'm in awe of it. So that's a little bit that I know.
Thank you. Anybody want to add to that?
There was a little confusion about land ownership in traditional Māori law. The land was communally owned, and that didn't suit the settlers who wished to buy land. So gradually they were able to find people who claimed that they had the right to sell the land for the tribe, which again was more divisive. And yes, the European laws came through to sort of say, yes, who owns this land? Someone has to own it. So that was tricky. And yes, I am not confused by, but definitely wondering if this was a meeting for Maori Land Court. The food available. So looking at that amount of food, there must be a huge number of people that we can't see. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so my understanding, and I haven't done a lot of research into the details here, but if you look at the biography of New Zealand history, these hui were held around the country, and people, Māori, needed to come physically and attend to express their ownership and rights to the land under the Pākehā tradition. And they arbitrarily brought in laws like that the land could not be owned by more than a certain number of people. I think the number was 10. And the reality was that it didn't work like that. And so you can imagine the upset that would have caused within whānau and within groups of people. And also there was a lot of waiting. It's so interesting that you say that, Tim, about the sense of waiting and the coming together for a purpose, because my understanding is that in Te Marae o Hine, in this space, and in other places around the country where the Māori court met, the Native Land Court met, that people had to come in and stay for quite long periods of time, days, weeks, to wait for the hearings. So there was a lot. So there was camping, there was living in these spaces going on. Now, an important thing to note about Manawatu, and I think I have this correct. This is certainly my understanding from talking to Warren, but I also know that there's disputes even about versions of history, but that even that there are differences in different regions about how much confiscation and how much selling and how much willing transfer there was. And certainly my understanding at this moment is that confiscation didn't happen in this area. It was much more of a willing transfer than in other areas of the country, which has led to a very different relationship with the Crown right through to today. And so that may go some way to explain the celebratory nature of this, of what we're seeing here. So it's complicated stuff. It's complicated stuff, isn't it? There's and for all of us who are teaching this history, it's important to, I think, to remember regional variations as well as general national stories. Ev, what were you going to say?
I want to ask a question because I don't know a lot about the Maori land courts, especially the further north. My knowledge of stuff's much more south. It would seem to me that a large number of Maori would come in
exactly
to take part in what was going on. And so how many Pākehā would be there in that? Is this Maori feeding their own?
That is what I assume. That is what I assume and understand from this photograph. So this is a feast. This is a collection of people who have come together, have spent quite a bit of time waiting for their hearings, and are now coming to an end, lifting lifting and celebrating the end of this process with a feast for their own. Yeah, and they've spent some time on this land. Now, I may have some of those details, you know, and as I say, some of these stories are contested, even the nature of confiscation and so on here, but I've done my best to share with you as this was shared with me. does it give us a flavor of what's going on there to the point that we might be able to relate to those people in those pictures a little bit, or does anybody need to raise anything, say anything?
Can I say something?
Of
But
course.
I don't. But are you moving on to the next step, Viv? Is that where you're going?
Yes.
With this next, so before you do, can we just talk a little bit about because you've been facilitating?
Yes.
Just take
Let's pause.
minutes just to talk about what you've just done.
Absolutely.
Because what you've done is a fantastic illustration of how this key works.
Right, so we'll just pause. We'll pause this world for a little minute and talk as teachers. We wouldn't do this with the children. We'd move on as children.
Right.
With the children.
Right.
Yeah. Go, Tim.
Yeah, because I think I'll speak for everybody by saying that, you know, got completely engrossed in this photograph and in this story. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened because of the way that you facilitated this. And we should draw attention to that because that's how this key works. So if we remember, Viv started by showing us this photograph, and it is actually quite a difficult photograph.
It is a difficult one.
Analyze, but that turned out to be a really good thing because it made us work really hard at it rather than it being an obvious. You know, the photograph is the photograph, and it's something that is quite difficult to analyze. But if you notice the way that Viv did it, she just kept supporting us in the analysis of it rather than jumping in and telling us or hoping that we were going to say something. It was the kind of language that Viv was using was, could you say a bit more about that? And yes, which part are you talking about there? And oh, I see what you mean. It's that bit there. So it's co-created. The understanding of this comes through the collaboration, and Viv is part of the collaboration. So rather than sort of, she knows what the photograph is and where this is going, but rather than sort of jumping in and going, telling us too early, she's allowing us the time to work it out for ourselves as best we can, muddle through. And I think this is key, if you like. This is fundamental to the way that this key works, because it's an investment, coming back to what we were saying earlier about it's important to become invested in this. If you imagine just sort of the other way around, if Viv had just sort of shown us this photograph and said, here's a photograph of, and then just told us, all it would do is turn us into passive listeners. I mean, you'd probably be quite interested, but we wouldn't be invested in it. We wouldn't have spent time trying to work out for ourselves. Is that a horse? What are those things at the back there? Are they people? So when the revelation comes, I mean, genuinely, when the revelation came that they were pigs, that was like that's completely changed the way that I'm seeing this photograph. I did not see those as pigs. And then it was like, what on earth are they doing? Lying a whole load of pigs down. What is that about?
I want to just say one thing, Tim, because I know you'll agree when I say this. You use the phrase figuring it out. She left us to figure it out. I actually think that what I do, and I know you do, is I leave you to make meaning. So you're not figuring it out. It doesn't actually matter whether you get it right. And that's important for us to remember as teachers, because if it was about getting it right, then when someone says, is that a row of people sitting really close together? Or no, I see a row of people sitting there really close together. You would kind of panic and go, oh, well, nearly. Well, I can see how it looks like that, because you'd be trying to move them towards, but actually it's a fascinating piece of meaning making. So what I find myself saying is something like, and so you're wondering if that's a whole row of people and they're sitting really tightly together. So the figuring it out, it's slightly different from that. It's meaning making of whatever the meaning is. And I hope you can feel that, because it's okay to wonder if that's a sack or a person, and it's okay to think that might be a horse. And the language supports that, doesn't it? So we never, we try to stop ourselves going, oh, nearly, or ooh, not quite, or it really is fine. And golly, even though I've done this a lot of times, it's really hard to hold back, because you keep feeling like oh, well, great, they've got lots out of it. But if you hold back and just say nothing and say anything else, someone will come up with something amazing. You know, so really, yeah, we've taken nearly the whole hour just doing that.
So there's a second point. And thank you for the figuring out thing. That wasn't quite right. We're not trying to figure it out. We're just trying to make meaning. So the second thing that's really important to the way this key worked is that you've done your research. That you're admitting that you don't know everything, which is absolutely right, but you have done your research. You know, you've gone and talked to people who know more than you do. You've researched, read up on this, and so that when you're talking about it, you're talking about it from a point of knowledge, and that's really important. We're not using this photograph, and this is absolutely key, particularly in photographs like this that have all of these cultural kind of dimensions to them and sensitivities, is that what we haven't done, and Viv hasn't led us that way, is to create our own story based on this photograph. We haven't said, oh, well, what about if it's a race and all these people have come to a race?
Let's do that. Let's make that up.
Yeah,
no, we're not making
we
it
haven't done that. There is a truth here. There's genuine history, and Viv knows that history or has studied the history in order to be able to talk about it. And that, again, if you're going to use photographs in this way, historical photographs and other images, before you start, you have to have done the research. You have to be in a point of knowing what you're talking about.
That was super valuable for me, because being up in Tainui, where the story is definitely raupatu or stolen land, when you started to explain the history, I started going down that line. But actually your knowledge of the history has given a depth or an understanding for another line to follow, like us, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but that was amazing.
And we're all of us learning how to teach our histories, aren't we, in Aotearoa at the moment, because it's a new curriculum, and it's new to many of us who didn't learn it ourselves. So I would certainly encourage, and I'm sure everybody is doing this, people to work with people who are knowledgeable. And and I'm sorry that in a way that we can't have Warren here with us, but I'm trying to represent what he taught me. Another thing I would say, that Warren and I worked quite hard to find a photo that felt okay for him, for us to use, because we're going to be representing someone in the photo. And my hunch, my sense from Warren was that if the children are going to represent someone, he said they can't ever be those people. That I can't know what someone felt or thought at that time. So we really can't speak for people at that time. And that's an interesting one, because that's an idea about role taking that perhaps doesn't come into our minds enough when we're thinking about teaching drama. We just tend to think that we can do lots of empathizing, but it's an interesting one, this, what right do we have to say we could stand in someone's shoes? So we've got language in here, something like, now we can't be this person, but maybe we could represent them. Maybe we could think about what we might think. And one thing that I noticed with working with Warren was that he, anyway, felt a little more comfortable if what we did was represent a child, if the students represented a child, because there's that point of connection with a fellow child and the childness of it. And the child is naive. The child just is responding to the situation as a child. Rather than, I'm talking to you as a teacher now, because we would not share this with the students, but rather than perhaps going into role as one of the people who's been sitting there for hours waiting for their hearing, which was my first instinct when I wrote this key, Warren's suggestion was that we might invite children in the class to go into role as this young child, because they don't know what's going on, and our point of connection might be nearer to them. Do you see what I mean? So I thought that was a great tip, actually. And I noticed, Tim, that in your key example, you've also got photos of children. So I think he's intuited a really nice point there, which is that children are going to be able to connect more authentically and genuinely with children in history than perhaps with adults in history. So anybody want to talk in teacher mode any more before I pop us on to the next step? Any more sort of teacher? Did someone put their hand up? Robin, is your hand up from before?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it is up now. I just have to go. I was just thinking that with the level that I work with, I think that would take a long time to spend the time that you're doing. And I'm just thinking how you would run it. I love the way that you were doing it, Viv, like the fact that it's sort of an investigation, a discovery about what this photo's around, and getting them to do it and sort of ask them to ask each other the questions. But I wonder whether, would it be, you know, I think it would work too to have a photograph in the different groups so they can all, because what I've found is that some kids won't give, you know, they won't give their feedback. So my point being is that if we could put them into little groups, but giving them those rules that you're saying, would that work, do you think?
Oh, that sounds like your instinct is about your children and you know who you're working with. What I would say is it's incredible how long kids can stay with a picture if one just keeps looking at it. I've been blown away. And yeah, a lot of people, when they come to dramatic inquiry, they think it's moving really slowly. You know, we moved really slowly, didn't we, Kylie, at the winter school? Like really slowly. We did about an hour on those scenarios, Tim, that you drew out for us. It was like a whole hour. Because the inquiry is so important. So as long as you can keep it going, the better, because that's the inquiry part of dramatic inquiry, I'd say.
Yeah, I suppose you could just
have a go. Come back and tell us what your children managed and how you did it.
No, well, that's good. I'm away overseas at the moment, not back, but I wanted to be on this. But I have to go now because I've got something else. But anyway,
lovely to see you.
Lovely to be with you all. Thank you so much. Okay.
So what I'll do is, just because of time as well, I'm just going to focus in on this little one. Do you remember her from the big photo? There she is. And I love Warren's suggestion that we might be able to you know, as children, the students might be able to empathize a little more with her. So if we look at this small child standing in the foreground, and for our benefit, I've kind of zoomed into her, but I could zoom back out again so that we can see her in the big photo. I've just taken the fronds out. Here we are. This camera has captured them standing with their right sleeve, or maybe it's a mitten, up in their mouth, you know, like little children do. And they're looking intently at someone or something. They're not looking at the camera like the little boy over on the other side. They're looking at something they've spotted across the road. I wonder what this child might be thinking about at this moment. Now, we can't know that. We can't be her, but we know the sorts of things that we thought when we were little like that. How old would you say she might be?
Four, perhaps?
Yeah, she's no more than 5 or 6, is she? She's little. They won't understand, presumably, the reasons for the gathering, but they will be very aware of the sights and the sounds and the smells and the feelings of the people around them. So I don't know if you've got a pen and a paper there beside you. I should have asked you to get one, or if you can think about this, if you've got something you can write on, just quickly grab it. I'll give you a moment. If you haven't, maybe you could just think in your head. I'm gonna grab a pen to give myself an opportunity to do it. And we're just gonna.
So this is what she's.
Yeah, I haven't said yet. I've just said grab a piece of paper. So what we're going to write down is write down a thought that you think might be going through this child's mind at this moment. Have you had a chance to do that? Anybody needing longer? Gosh, it's so weird doing these things on Zoom. You know, when it's children in the class, you can see them. They're going. And I just want you to notice the power of writing it down. It solidifies it. We often do things in drama where we just sort of put a hand on the shoulder or something like that. But I'm more and more seeing the value of writing quickly. And if we were in the classroom, I would say, I'm going to ask you to stand. And the reason we do that in the classroom is that Tim's taught me this. The standing is a really important signal that we're going into the world. So you're not going to stand, but if you could just do that, please. You know, take your energy up as though you're, because it actually changes things. And let's just represent that child for a moment, the child in the photograph. No need to move, like we don't have to represent them moving. We're just going to take up the position that she's in that photograph. So although you're sitting, maybe you could just raise your hand up close to your mouth, put your left hand at your side. And I'm just going to invite you to, if you were in the classroom, what I would do is move around you like George Shaler with his camera, perhaps coming up closer to you. But what I'll do is I'll just say the names. I'll say the names. And if you feel like it, you could take your hand away from your mouth just for a moment and speak out loud what this child's thoughts would be. So I'll say your name, and if you feel like sharing those thoughts, please do. So first, Ulysses.
Where's my mom?
Evelyn.
I can see my mum, but I don't know those other people.
Kylie, would you like to unmute and share yours?
I don't know what they're doing across the road.
Shona.
Getting hungry now.
Why are all the people over there?
Him. Jen.
Toilet.
Yvonne.
Where's Kuya? I want to go home.
Rachel.
Let those kids play with me.
Diane.
What's over there?
Gillian.
I'm hungry.
Anyone else? I've got mine. My tummy's rumbling. How much longer are we going to have to be in this busy place? And relax. Right. So, and you can see how important the stand up and the sit down would be in that little moment, because without it, we're kind of a little bit stuck in the role. How was that? Oh, Kiana, I didn't ask you. I think you said them anyway, didn't you?
No, I did. I think I bumped in for somebody else. Sorry.
How was that? What did we gather from those comments?
That she's obviously standing back and an observer and a little tentative about whatever she wants to do or is looking at.
There's a tentativeness in that body language that some of us picked up on, eh? That we heard the word mum or kuya or the kind of matriarch was called on at least 3 times in those examples. So that was a common thread.
Also maybe just that concept of time.
That she'd been there a long time, you mean, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard when you're a little person, isn't it?
Because the comments about being hungry, that's to do with time too, isn't it? Waiting for a long time to eat.
Yeah.
also the concept that maybe she doesn't really, not really connected to why they're there. Like she's looking at the other way at what's going on across the road, or what's going on for her. I don't know, that's just a thought.
And that concept of not being connected to the place where she's standing. There's a number of people talked about home, wanting to be home, and home was somewhere else. Yeah, a little bit dislocated. Nice. Nice. So in the example in the book, the suggestion is that, in fact, you haven't gone a whole lot into land court and the difficulties and the details around the area, that you just give enough to know that there's this big meeting, that there's a land court in session, and that there's this big feast coming up, and this little child is there, and then the children voice that. But the idea being that by now students are invested in this moment and in this child's experience enough to begin an inquiry. So at this point, the next step is to ask the students, what are we curious to know more about? What are we still wondering? And use those as the starting point for further inquiry, whether through dramatic inquiry or other forms of inquiry. And I hope you can feel that even if what you had now presented to you was some information about the Native Land Court, it would be more interesting because we've I mean, it's innately interesting, but more interesting to us as a human connection, because we've connected on a human level with a child affected by even the day-to-day experience of waiting for a long time. I certainly can feel that from here. I've known this photo really well, but I'll confess this to you now. This is the first time I've actually taught this example. I prepared it, but it's the first time I've taught it. And I feel much more connected to this photo than I ever have, even though I've seen it for a number of years. So it's worked for me, and I hope it's worked for you, and I hope it might work for your children. And
can I just say something? I know
yeah,
that you're up against it in terms of time, because we've
go
run
ahead,
over a little bit, but I think I've taught this key hundreds of times, not using photograph, but other photographs, but I've not been on the other end of it. And
we say this every time, don't we?
I know. What was really extraordinary, actually, experiencing it from this side, was the empathy that by just choosing that child and focusing in on that child, you really had to look from our perspective. So I'm talking for myself, I guess, is at her body language, at what she's actually doing, and then interpreting that. And then the next job was to put the words that she would be thinking as a child, and that's, I haven't been for a very, very long time. I've got children of my own, and I you know, they're now in their 20s, but it actually thinking like a 4-year-old is pretty hard. You sort of think, well, what would she actually think to herself? And so you're doing an awful lot of different kind of work, is what I'm saying. You're doing a lot of hard thinking, but it's a different kind of thinking. If you hadn't done that, if we'd have finished at the point where you told us about the history and we'd learned about the context of the photograph, if we hadn't done this extra task, we wouldn't have done the thing of empathy. We wouldn't have imagined ourselves, even if we're ourselves as a 4-year-old, in this circumstance, in this situation. And one of the things, so this is I'm going around the houses, but one of the things that artists do is that they give us a view, they show us something about, you know, a subject. And if they're talking about the past, it might be a film or a picture or a book or whatever. But they also give us points of view. They allow us to sort of have access to the people in those pieces of art. And that's what we're doing by stepping into that, imagining ourselves, we're empathizing and you know, imagining ourselves in that situation. And I understand very well the reservations about this, about not choosing, not to step into the minds of adults without knowing an awful lot more about that. You know, we can't do that because we don't know enough about those people's lives and their concerns. But we can empathize with a child who doesn't understand what's going on. That she's sort of stuck in the middle of this, and
point,
she's
isn't
had no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to draw attention to the difference between what you'd done up till then and then this step, which is a very different kind, and it's the dramatic step. It's the step
the dramatic step. And I think I'm always going to think of the additional frame distance of going in to the role of a child, even though it means we haven't plunged into land court stuff. We haven't tried to think about what it must have been like to wait for people to feel so fraught. We've gone into the world of it, and that's probably more legitimate than trying to say that we could ever imagine what that might be like for the people there in the background. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a real person. This little girl would have hopefully grown up to be a person, and they're going to have family and so, you know, and lifetimes and descendants. At the same time, by the fact that they are a child here, they're also an archetype that we can all relate to, because we have all been a child. So there's a point of connection between us and this person, which I think is kind of beautiful. So yeah, that's a nice piece of advice, perhaps, or guidance to help us into these photos that we want to handle thoughtfully. Did anybody else have any comments on what we have gone slightly over? Sorry, but we'll keep going until we've wrapped up. Anybody else got any thoughts on that idea of going in through, you know, a child, or what it was like to move from, because it's a different activity, the looking at the photo and intellectualizing about it and analyzing it, and then stepping in. It's like we've gone from head to heart a little bit, isn't it? All right, so I'll just quickly talk about the final step, and then we'll wrap up. So the final step here, as I say, you could this could be the opening for quite a long-term inquiry, and some suggestions here are that once that inquiry has been done and children have built up a little bit of knowledge about the Native Land Court and why it was created and how it happened in this area. Another way of distancing from material that you want to handle sensitively is through time. So one suggestion here is that the students could be invited to imagine another moment 20 years into the future when this child, now an adult, writes to or talks to another member of their whānau about their memories of that earlier time. And so what that does is to invite us to take this child into an imagined future and think about what the future brought for them. And that, of course, would rely on a bit of understanding about the land court and what did happen in this area. But I quite like that idea of bookending an inquiry with a child, and then the child's experience reflected on later in life. And the suggestion is that if they do this creative writing, which is, you know, imaginative, they can then compare that with factual Native Land Court proceedings, because there are written records of what did go on. So always, if we're working in history, we do want to keep taking it back to the factual and the actual and the documents. And it's amazing to see even quite young children getting really excited about documents from the past when they've got a reason to compare them with what they've created. So and then when we come to the reflective part, a critical discussion, really important, on how stories change depending on who is telling them. So how stories about this particular part of history change over time, the way that it was talked about then, what it was called then, the native land court would not be called that today. And so a really critical part of, I think you'll agree, teaching history is to talk about the changes in language and how stories of history change depending on who is telling them. And inviting children to be critical even about the accounts that they're, especially if they're seeing contemporary accounts. So there you go. That's about what I've got for you on that key. I'm going to this slideshow is. Ooh, I was going to say the slideshow is available, but the video the video won't have the link on it. But if you pause and type that into your search engine, you'll be able to see a little bit more context about this, and I know where else you can find it. If you visit the Try This website, we've got some links with land court information to help teach this example if you wanted to. There's no reason why you couldn't teach, even if you're not in the Manawatu, you couldn't teach this as a way into land courts if you live in another area. Yeah, so I think we've discussed and reflected as we've gone. So in terms of the planning for this, obviously you need a context and you need an image. And as we've said, an image that includes people works particularly well. And I'm going to use this, I think, in future more and more with images of children, because I think that's a connection for children if I'm teaching that age group. And then make sure you've got your list of what you want students to acquire in terms of facts and information, and then any writing. I think it's a fairly straightforward key to prepare, as long as you've got a powerful image. And if you're using an image that's historical or cultural, make sure that you're getting advice from a trusted mentor on that. So I'll leave you to think about that and think about what image you might be able to play with, explore with your students, and do come back next time and tell us how you got on. We'd love to hear, and or send it into the website so that we can show other people. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tim, I think our next one is actually next weekend, isn't it? Is that correct? We're in a week's time. We're coming back. Yeah. So
well, the next one is in 12 hours time, and then there's another one which is in the UK, and then
so our next
if you feel like coming to another one, 12 hours.
So that's confusing, yeah, because we do 2 sessions per key. So the UK session of this will be in 12 hours time, but the next New Zealand session we're actually catching up. So next weekend, the 4th, will be the next one of these. If you'd like to join us to talk about key 10, we'd love to see you there. It's a good one, actually. Assemble an images. That's not very good, is it? What I've put on the slide there. But anyway,
will an invite come out to it, Viv?
What's that?
You'll send an invite out.
Yes. Yes, we will send an invitation out for that. So I'm going to close because we've gone 20 whole minutes over time. Thank you for staying with us. I'll close with my thanks to everybody. Thank you, Tim. Thanks to Warren for his support and help with that key. And I'll just close with this karakia. Kua mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, mana katia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, ai o ki te aorangi. So that's saying our work is finished for the moment. Asking for a blessing on us all, on our colleagues and our families, and peace to the universe. We ask for a lot, but why not? Peace to the universe. That would be a great thing to achieve. Thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed spending this time with you, and I hope you enjoyed that key and find it useful in your practice. Thanks very, very much. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll say goodbye.